Dr. Mark Janghese here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about don't let yourself act like your parents and your grandparents in terms of seeing what the young generation is doing and getting appalled by it. So there's lots of things to potentially be appalled by in society, and some of those things are true violations of rights, violations that are, or they're unfair, various sorts of things. But there's a lot of stuff that is really just due to you getting old, and everybody, as they get older, they often see these new things that are occurring with the new generation, and they're appalled. And you say to them, well, you did your own weird things as far as your parents or grandparents were concerned. No, that was different. What we did was totally rational, but what they're doing, what this new generation is doing, is totally beyond the pale. And oh my, no, you just have to always presume that as long as there's no rights violations and some kind of fundamental principles being violated, that they're universal generation to generation, roughly speaking. You're feeling roughly the same way as your grandparents did about your parents' generation and your parents did about your generation. So, and there's a reason that it happens like this in every generation. It's because as there's cultural evolution, as we've talked about, for example, this came up in why masks, the science on masks changed overnight. This was 50 to 70 science moments ago. These same kinds of social forces are constantly shaping the membership signals of new kinds of groups and communities. And sometimes those communities are very righteous and very political, but sometimes they're very simple things, just like, we're part of this neighborhood where we wear Lululemons, the ladies, and these, whereas other, these are sometimes much more simple kinds of things. So generationally, often they slide into different kinds of fashions and different kinds of things, but the things that get selected for as membership signals for that generation are often the more crazy stuff. In fact, they'll select for the more crazy stuff as either positions that you hold by virtue of being of that generation and being a member of whatever that generation is, or kinds of things that you'll wear. And they need to be kinds of things that you wear or kinds of positions which are crazy as far as the parents, the older generations, are concerned. Otherwise it wouldn't work. Otherwise dad would come and say, oh yeah, I want to wear that too, or I believe that too, and the kids would be like, well, we got to come up with a different membership signal. Now, they're not consciously thinking that through, but that's the idea. It won't serve as a good membership signal for that younger generation unless only the younger generation would hold it. So not only it's not only that these things shift and end up in weird cultural traditions that older folks are uncomfortable with, it's often selected for, over time, evolutionarily selected for, that the kinds of positions that the new generation have or signal, or the things that they signal by virtue of what they're wearing or doing, is purposefully, by design, not by any individual person purposely, by design, it ends up being weird as far as the older generations are concerned. So this is perfectly normal. And I see a lot of folks, and I'm not going to get into which issues, but as long as no one's rights are being violated or anything like this, or it's not unfair, like in certain areas, I don't want to get into it, I want to keep it sort of very broad here, then just sit back and say, is this really just a generational thing? And there's not, it's gross to me, or it's weird to me, I can't stand it. What's the difference between what your parents thought about your generation? And odds are, if you really start pushing it, well, I'm not sure odds are. I think odds are most of us, when we start going through this, somehow convince ourselves that no, this is a line too far. But again, that's exactly what your parents said about what you were doing. So just sit back, and this can minimize and relax about it. Sit back and relax about it, and this can minimize the number of political disagreements and then the number of fights that you're involved in, if you can just point, contract it to the cases where there's actually people whose rights are being violated, or there's some kind of unfairness that's going on that needs to be remedied. And that was your Science Moment.